Hey guys, this is Mike Mahaffey, the old bastard BJJ guy, here for BJJ Mental Models. Back in my day, we had to walk uphill in the snow both ways to get to the academy just to learn some crappy technique from a random purple belt. You kids have it so easy because now you can just subscribe to BJJ Mental Models Premium and get tons of great audio courses to learn new techniques, enhance your mindset, and entertain yourself. You can even get personalized rolling reviews from some of your favorite BJJ Mental Models coaches, including me. It's like having your own seminar, you spoiled little whippersnappers. So what are you waiting for? Subscribe to BJJ Mental Models Premium right now, get off my lawn, and go train.
Hey, welcome to BJJ Mental Models. I'm Steve Kwan. BJJ Mental Models is your guide to a conceptual and intelligent jiu-jitsu approach. And in today's mini-episode, I want to talk about a mental model that's been very helpful to me personally in jiu-jitsu, and that is the anatomic hierarchy. So what this means, it's a way to think about the different parts of your body, how you use them in jiu-jitsu, and when one part of the body might be a better option than another. So let's talk briefly about the human body here. In terms of the parts of our bodies that we're allowed to use in a jiu-jitsu context, you can basically think of your body as having 6 parts. You've got your core, or your torso. That's your center mass, which can't do much by itself, but is propped up by a lot of powerful limbs. You've got both your legs, you've got both your arms, and you've got your head. So 2 arms, 2 legs, a head, a torso. That's 6 major parts of the body that you can use in jiu-jitsu. Now, of course, we can get more in the reads here. We can break things down further and we can talk about how your arm has multiple segments in and of itself. But the purpose of this concept is to simplify the thinking here. So when we talk about the anatomic hierarchy, we're trying to talk about things in simple, easy to understand terms. Now, if we walk through all of these parts of the body from the strongest to the weakest, first let's talk about our torso, our core. This is our center mass. This is where we've got a lot of very powerful muscles. We've got protective bone structures like the rib cage. Our back is there. There's a lot of power that comes from our core. And in fact, a big part of what we do in jiu-jitsu is we're trying to use the rest of our limbs to move our core and use it more effectively. But the core by itself is very limited in terms of what it can do. If you don't use your arms or your legs or your head, your core is not really particularly useful. It is when you start using the rest of your limbs that you get that ability to generate big power. So going down the hierarchy, next up are our legs. 2 very powerful muscle groups. A lot of power gets generated through our legs. Think of how much people can leg press. That is a lot of weight, many, many times our own body weight. Going down the hierarchy further, we've now got our arms. Our arms are tremendously important, but they're not the most powerful weapons that we've got. They give us the benefit of having a lot of dexterity. We can grab things with our fingers. We can move things and manipulate things with our hands much more easily than we can with our feet. But from a muscle perspective, although there is a lot of power in our arms, it's just not the same as in the rest of our body. That's why, for example, a punch that is thrown just with your arm is not very powerful. The true power of a punch is when you use your whole body in tandem. You push off with your feet, you swivel your body, you put your torso into it. That's where the power of a punch comes from. The arm is just the way that we deliver that force to someone else. And then, of course, the last part of the anatomic hierarchy and the weakest is our head. We can't really grab much with our head. It's not particularly strong. I would not really advise trying to use your head as a weapon a lot of the time, but that said, it is an option. Your head is basically like a giant cinder block, and that is a tool that you can use at your disposal. An example of this is if you're trying to pin someone on top of them, you might use your head as a wedge to prevent them from moving. So it's still effective. It's the least effective of the tools in the anatomic hierarchy, but it is still an important tool. And in the context of jiu-jitsu, especially against a good opponent, you're going to want to use every tool at your disposal. So don't forget your head as an option if it's there. Now, hopefully this makes sense. We've broken down the 6 parts of the body as I describe here in the anatomic hierarchy. Your question might now be, okay, how does this actually help my jiu-jitsu? I agree that we have arms and legs and a torso and a head, but how does that help me do kimuras? So here's my answer to that. The mistake that a lot of people make in jiu-jitsu when they're attempting a technique is they're not using the strongest parts of their body. They're often using some of the weaker parts of the body, and maybe they're neglecting the opportunities to get some of the big muscle groups in there. I'll give you an example. If I am trying to armbar you from top position, if I try to armbar you with just my arms, meaning I grab your wrist or your forearm or your hand and I pull your arm back, I might get it, but it's really not the strongest way to do an armbar. I'm using two of my arms against one of yours, and that is a good trade, but it could be better. A more experienced grappler will try to put their whole body into an armbar. They're going to use their legs to clamp onto the person and to bridge up. They're going to use their torso to bridge up and to get force into the arm. The idea behind an armbar is you're using your entire body against their one arm, as opposed to just using your two arms against their one arm, which is obviously a lot weaker. Now, if I had to guess as to why people sometimes fail to use all of their weapons, I'd say it might be because we think very deliberately about what we do with our hands, but we don't think so deliberately about what we do with the rest of our body. When you're walking down the street, are you thinking deeply about the movement of your feet? Maybe a bit. But are you thinking about what you're doing with your torso? Probably not. What about your head? Probably not. A lot of the things that we do with our hands are very complicated movements. They require thought. Whereas a lot of the things we do with the rest of our body, sometimes it seems like those things happen on autopilot. And maybe that translates to jiu-jitsu. Maybe that's why we tend to be very focused on what's happening with our hands, but not so much with the rest of our body. One of the big breakthroughs you'll go through as you get more experienced in jiu-jitsu is learning to use all of the parts of your body in tandem. Once you get to blue belt or purple belt, you're probably going to be able to use your body kind of like an octopus, where you've got your arms and your legs all coordinating at the same time. When you're a new white belt, this is a lot harder to do because coordinating your arms and legs together is a skill that really doesn't get used that much in day-to-day life. When people get onto the mats and they try guard work for the first time, this is probably the first time they've really had to think about using all of these body parts in a combat situation together. So that's a big growth area from white belt through to blue and purple, learning to use all of the elements of the anatomic hierarchy together. So my takeaway here is, regardless of what you're trying to do in jiu-jitsu, you want to use as many parts of your body as you can. And not just as many parts of your body as you can, you want to follow the anatomic hierarchy and use your bigger, more powerful weapons if you can. Always be thinking when you're doing something in jiu-jitsu, how could I engage my legs into this? How could I engage my core into this? And also, don't forget, what can I do with my head here? You know, we've only got two hands, and if those are tied up, you still have your head, which you can use for admittedly less useful things, but you might still, as I mentioned earlier, be able to use your head as a wedge to block your opponent's movement. So my troubleshooting advice to anyone here is, whatever you're trying to do in jiu-jitsu, always be thinking, how can I get more of my weapons engaged here? And how can I use the more powerful weapons in the anatomic hierarchy? I don't want to be just doing stuff with my hands or my head if I can avoid it. Hope that helps. I got a lot of great stuff coming up in these mini episodes. You can get the rest of them, plus our main podcast, plus our newsletter, and BJJ Mental Models Premium at bjjmentalmodels.com. I will put a link in the show notes to make it easier for you to get there. Thanks again for listening. I really do appreciate everyone spending their attention here, hanging out with me, and I'll talk to you next time.